Gods of the Deep is a new, lower budgeted, we'll say lower budgeted, sci-fi horror Lovecraftian film from writer Charlie Steeds, who I've seen at least one of his other movies. I want to say maybe two. I saw The Barge People for sure. I think there might be another one, but regardless, this is a guy who makes pretty ambitious films on a super low budget. And this is about a research team that goes down to explore a portal down in the ocean, potentially to another world.
Yeah.
And, you know, they go down there, they go through it, and they get more than they bargained for.
Yeah.
Sure do.
Sure do.
Sure do. So I'll say that if you're someone who's opposed to low budget movies, you're out immediately. This is definitely not going to be for you in the slightest. As far as my enjoyment level of it, you know, it started promising enough. I was like, because we usually put on movies like this, and movies in general, but usually like the lower budgeted stuff that we know literally nothing about and could be dog shit for all we know. We usually throw these on for like 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
To get a feel. And if it's feeling promising at all, we'll say, okay, we'll just like keep going with it. And so the first 5 or 10 minutes, you know, you could tell like the budget was $5. But I thought the acting from the leads in it were serviceable enough. I thought that the premise was intriguing enough. There was some references to Lovecraft, the typical ones you always see. But I was like, yeah, okay. And I could laugh at the sets and I could laugh at all this stuff, but I always try to keep my mind open as you do.
Yeah, of course.
And, you know, and that's something with these kinds of films, you just have to suspend disbelief, or you have to accept that that's the way things look, or this is the buildings that these guys are in.
Yeah.
You know, because you're talking about people that are supposed to be part of like an organization that has a lot of money, and they're like in a freaking janitor's closet. And there's like a couple, crude things on the walls that are supposed to be like scientific, and you're
like, yeah.
Oh yeah. God, okay. But I always just look at that as kind of charming.
Absolutely.
Like, whatever. Yeah. I don't care. So I am an audience member that is totally open to films like this always.
Yes. Yeah.
But I feel like where this film started to kind of fall apart is it got pretty silly. Mm-hmm. And because this is that lower budget kind of B-grade movie, and I'm sure the director is obviously well aware of this and is probably a big fan of those types of movies, and kudos to anyone who makes films like this, because they are making the kinds of films they want to make outside of this, like outside of studio interference. Mm-hmm. Right? They're independently financing their own movies.
Yeah.
And it's a give and take kind of situation.
Yeah.
Right? You get your vision as far as like what you're in control of, but you don't have the budget to do everything you wish you could.
Right.
Right. So it's got its ups and its downs to making stuff like this. But yeah, that all being said, I'm curious on what you thought, but I just, where I was going with that is like, I don't know how intentional some of the goofiness is, right? Because a movie like this, I feel like it does try to be fairly serious.
Yeah, I felt like it was a serious film.
But there is some silly, goofy stuff that I'm like, is that meant to be silly and goofy in a charming way? Or is it just actually not good, which makes it feel goofy, right, but they were intending for it to be taken seriously?
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I think we probably landed in like the same spot with the film. I think that the acting was pretty good from everybody. Like you said, I thought the premise was intriguing enough, and I'm usually like I'm always on board with Lovecraft, cosmic horror type things because there's just never enough out there. One thing that I do want to mention that I actually really liked with this film was the score. I thought that the music fit really well. I don't know. I'm not sure who did it, but I think that they did a good job at the music in this. I think that it paired really well with all of the scenes. Um, but I think for me, the film started to fall apart in like the last act. That's
Yeah.
where things kind of started to go down for me, partly because there was a couple scenes that we were a little confused on like the geography of some character movements that were
Yeah.
important to understand like something that happened and that
Yeah.
was like really confusing to us for a moment. And then like you said, there is some like goofy lines at the end that I think were probably intentional to give it like a, kind of like a B movie flavor to it, but because the rest of the film I thought was played pretty like
Straight.
seriously,
Yeah.
it does kind of read as a little bit of like a dramatic
Mismatch.
tone
Yeah.
shift.
Yeah.
So that was for me like I just, but then at the very end it kind of does reclaim the like serious like tone, or the more like yeah, straight tone that it was going for initially. So that was probably my biggest like criticism of the film. I think that like whenever you do a cosmic horror, Lovecraft film on a low budget, like there's always going to be um it's hard, it can be hard to do is really what it, because there's so much like cosmic horror is hard to do in general like even with a big budget. And I did like what we got from this. Like there's some shots of a creature that I thought was pretty cool, and I think that the filmmakers tried to really utilize like lighting, and
Mm.
I did appreciate that as well. I guess what I would have wanted more from it, because what I really like with cosmic horror is like this sense of like unreality and like surrealism and weirdness happening. And I do think that that was sort of attempted, but it didn't go enough for me to really buy it. Like there's a few characters that say some things of like, like our minds are being messed with or whatever. And I was just kind of like, I wanted more of that, because there
Absolutely.
was some in there for sure that I was like, okay, but I think you can always, when you do like a Lovecraft movie, I think that you can always get weirder. And I think that it only benefits the film to take it in that direction. Um, so I don't know. I mean, like overall, I think it was like an enjoyable experience. Like it was fine to watch it, but it's definitely not a favorite cosmic horror like indie film for me.
No.
So that's about it. But
Yeah, it lacks in the um where you're messing with the reality
yeah,
around people for sure. I definitely think with a film like this, um, if I look at other movies that deal with Lovecraft and cosmic horror that I love, my prime example would be In the Mouth of
yeah,
Madness. There's such a distortion
mm-hmm.
of reality when John throughout the film, right? So with John Trent getting into the world,
Mm-hmm.
there's that introduction with Sutter Kane's agent who comes at him with an axe, and then the more he reads and the closer he gets to the
Mm-hmm.
source, the more reality comes undone.
Yes, and there's also very commonly with Lovecraft films this like sense of like fate and destiny of like you're like being led to the old gods or to this like conclusion. And that was also hinted at in here, where it was kind of like this was sort of like a meant to be type of situation. But I think that that impending sense of doom, especially that's in the Mouth of Madness, was lacking in this one.
Yeah,
And I do think that that's also a key element to Lovecraft, is having that like that sense of doom that's just like lurking, and like the characters might not recognize it or acknowledge it or accept it, but the viewer should be like, that's like there's major flags of like something's going to happen.
You know, kind of taking back what I said a little tiny bit about me being completely open to a movie like this because of the budget and this and that. So I will roll that comment back just a tiny bit, only because there are instances, and they happened in here, and they can happen in any of these movies, and this can happen with a bigger budget movie as well. It doesn't only happen here, but when you have certain designs, when you have what you put on screen matters, right? So you can have something be lower budgeted, but you've always got to think about what you're putting in front of the screen and how it's going to connect with your audience and if it's going to take them out of the film. And there's certain things in here, like the look of their submersible
Mm.
the solo submersible that he goes down in, that's literally just like a plexiglass cube. And like stuff like that, where like, no matter what, I can't take it seriously. And it's like they're trying to have these dramatic scenes in it, and I'm just looking at it like it feels so campy and so silly in
Yeah.
that I think that the lines, like the calamari lines and stuff like that, while those are B movie goofy and do play into that tone of like a more self-aware film, the rest of the tone, like we had talked about, tries to sell this like it is very straightforward,
Yeah.
um, serious horror. And when I look at that kind of stuff, it's hard. And there's set design stuff that I honestly don't even understand the practicality of it. Like they're chains, but they're supposed to be like beads that are like in front
Mm.
of a
Mm-hmm.
door. Like you're talking about a submersible that goes down to the depths of the Marianas Trench, and they've got like there's like multiple different rooms, bunk beds, and then there's like a room that has like chains that come down, like you're entering some psychics
Yeah.
room where she's going to
Yeah.
read your
Yeah.
palm or something, and they separate the chains. Like there's literally no reason
Yeah.
these would be here. And then
I
there's like fire escape signs on the wall, and it's like a submersible would have a fire escape.
Yeah, I would say that I agree. I think that the set design, um, again, like acknowledging that it's like on a lower budget, but I think that maybe more focus could have been spent on that a little bit because it does sort of take you out of the immersion. And even, even if it's like, okay, well, we can only afford these materials, we can only afford to like make it look like this or
I
whatever,
get it.
there could still be maybe like an acknowledgement like in universe of like somebody being like, that thing, like that's gonna be like that's supposed to protect me or whatever, and then somebody making some explanation of like, yeah, well, whatever, it's
I don't
like
think
this
they
kind
want
of
to.
thing.
I don't think they want to draw attention to it.
Probably
But I
not,
get what you're
but like
saying.
for, I guess for me as like
Yeah,
a, that's how I would think, and then I would be like, okay, at least they like addressed the visual and like gave an explanation, and then even explained like, oh no, it's actually really safe, it just like looks like whatever.
yeah.
Like I, for me that would work
Because the
better, but
overall design of the exterior big ship that they go down in is cool.
yeah, yeah,
Even though the front of it has two circular windows on the front, and then when they show it from the cockpit in the inside, there's a like a rectangular window, but then we find out that's a screen. But it's like, what are those windows for then?
yeah,
Right? Like
yeah, I don't
that.
know, I don't
Are you
know.
like one should be for the
Mm,
pilot and the other one should be for the co-pilot? I'm assuming that's what the windows are for
yeah,
that are on the front of the ship. But for
right.
some reason, they're using a camera, and then you look out the front and there's no windows from where they're sitting, and you're like, where are those windows
Yeah,
inside this ship? Like, why are those there? Right, so
right,
it doesn't line up
right.
with the design of the ship, stuff like that. But that's like nitpicky, I
It is.
suppose.
It is a little
But
bit.
it is
Which I
something
think,
it's hard to ignore.
yeah. And I think, I mean, when we review like lower budget movies, I like to give feedback about things.
Yeah,
That's all. Like I think it's I mean, we maybe don't say it enough when we review low budget films. I think we do it maybe more when we review like ultra low budget. But like we definitely know how hard it is. We haven't made a movie. Like we know that it's like not, we're just people that are like talking about it from the viewer perspective.
Absolutely.
So like I know that there's practicalities behind the scenes that like, of course we don't understand because we haven't done it. But I think it is helpful though to just kind of get feedback and like especially when we love watching movies and we watch a ton of them. So we've seen a lot of things that like work and don't work for us personally.
Yeah.
And that's definitely, something to acknowledge.
The two leads in this, the main guy and the main girl, are good. I think that, I think like someone like my father, I always use him as an example because he's like the traditional film goer who doesn't really care about film outside of just like the entertainment side of it, and he just looks for the big budget and
like, where's the explosions,
the quality acting and all of that. Like he would watch this and it would be pure trash from beginning to end, right? He would think the acting was horrendous. He would think everything about this movie is horrendous.
I think the acting from everyone was actually pretty good. Like
for this kind of movie, it is serviceable and totally
there's
fine.
Like a couple moments of like a little bit of amateur delivery, but like overall I think it was pretty good. Like I actually quite enjoyed it from everyone, and I think that they sold their characters pretty well.
They did the best they could with what they had, and I'm fine with that. I don't know. Overall, it didn't go enough into the Lovecraft. It didn't go enough into the unreality. That's definitely its downside. But I think if you're into ultra low budget films, you don't mind obviously like micro budgeted sets and whatever and amateurish acting, and you're like a big Lovecraft fan, because like Lovecraft these days I feel like only gets made low budget.
I mean, besides there's so many. I mean, Annihilation is like the biggest one that I would think of, and then like sometimes like
get them here
alien
and there,
films have a little bit of like the cosmic horror in them. Like Arrival sort of has it, but not. But they're like a very specific. They're like alien movies versus like Lovecraft cosmic horror. Like there's definitely a distinction. And I feel like low budget is always the ones that try and do Lovecraft cosmic horror, and it's a bummer because I love it. Like I think it can be so cool and so scary. It's like one of the scarier subgenres to explore because it's like, it goes into a lot of different things, obviously. But yeah.
Well, sure. The unknown depths of our own planet and what secrets lie within is always going to be an intriguing premise. So. I like that kind of stuff, but man, I really wish that someone like this, I don't know, would Charlie Steeds want a big budget to work with if they were like, you can do whatever you want? I would assume he would, and I would love to see this movie with a budget. Just give him a budget. I'd be super curious on what this would look like.
Yeah.
So that's it. Let us know if you check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Bye.